Welcome to the Things You Can't Unhear podcast. I'm your host, Maritza Barone. In this show, I will introduce you to ideas, concepts, and mindsets that will open your mind to a new world of well-being and personal life growth. Through eye-opening interviews, we elevate people in the world doing amazing things for humanity and share insights that will shift you to become the happiest, healthiest, kindest, and most compassionate version of you. Well, hello everyone. Welcome back to Things You Can't Unhear. I am Maritza and I'm so glad you pressed play and have joined me here today. Now, today's episode is a memorable one for me. I don't know if it's because we as a collective have been through so much shared experience this last year or so. But most recently, my guests have really been turning up fully and sharing so openly and authentically in our conversations. And I can't even call these interviews anymore. These are genuinely real conversations that have helped me and so many of our listeners feel connected and inspired. I honestly leave these interviews feeling like I have made a great friendship with the people that I've spoken to because they share themselves so openly. And it's not easy to do that. Today's chat was with Matt Donovan, which was an empowering one, but also quite an emotional one. Matt is the founder of a charity called Food for Change that helps to provide food for the hungry. They do that through growing and rescuing food. And since they started, they have donated more than 135,000 meals and rescued more than 155,000 from going to waste. Matt shares with us the pain that caused him to find his purpose to start Food for Change with grace, authenticity, and true openness. And for that, I thank him deeply. I hope you get as much out of this conversation as I did. Well, hello, Matt Donovan. Thank you for joining me on Things You Can't Unhear.
No worries. Thank you for having us. Looking forward to the chat.
Me too. Now, which part of the world are you joining us from right now?
Currently in Melbourne, so for a nice change, we're actually free and able to move around.
I know. Remember our 2019 lives when we were just free and had consistency? Seems so long ago. So how are you at the moment, apart from all of what's going on in the world? Just personally, how are you dealing with life?
Personally, I guess like myself, a lot of people in Melbourne, lockdown last year was a little bit tough at times. And obviously we'll get into what I do shortly, but having the farm and that element of the charity that we run was an amazing godsend, really.
The space, true. Yeah.
The space was amazing. Currently, my son's back at school this week, which is awesome. So it's been a mixture of homeschooling for the last year and a half, and it's good to have a bit of extra, I guess, headspace to get some work done and sort of plow forward. And
Well, you don't like being interrupted every 10 seconds?
Not really. No. I don't know why.
All right. Well, I got you on the show because you're doing something really phenomenal, and I'm a big fan of purpose-led individuals, and that's definitely what you do. You launched Food for Change several years ago now, and since then have provided hundreds and thousands of meals to people in need in such a short time. Tell me about the organization and how it works.
Yeah, I guess came about. There's a lot of life experiences that lead you to do certain things. And I'm sure everybody that's got a business or is doing something in their lives will say, well, how did I get there? And you're like, oh, I don't know. It was just like 50 or 60 different things, which all sort of came to a point for me back in 2016. I say it as it was an unfortunate time, but in hindsight, it's something amazing has come out of it. So I was going through a divorce at the time and relocated to Melbourne with my son. I had my son pretty much full time, which is amazing. But at that time, it presented a few challenges and I had to close a business down and decided to take about 3 years off to spend the time with him before he started school. He was just about 2 at the time, I think. It was quite a few years ago. And when he started going to daycare, I started getting a bit bored. basically. So I went from running a business, and we had a farm and a few other bits and pieces, and I just went, oh, I'm really bored. So I went and started volunteering in the food relief sector, and I picked that kind of area to volunteer and give back. My father was homeless for a period of his life before he passed away. And unbeknownst to the family, we knew nothing that was kind of going on. It was a random call just before he passed, which was quite shocking, and obviously had a quite big effect on me. So I wanted to sort of basically give back and help the homeless. Like, I was in a fortunate position where I had the money and the time to do that. And then as I was doing that, I was really, really shocked at the statistics. Back then it was just over 2 million. Because of COVID, it's well over 3 million in 2020 people seeking food relief in Australia, which is like 10% of our population.
Wow.
So, which is huge. And I guess the statistic that got me was 1/3 of them are kids. And having a kid at home, I just couldn't imagine kind of what that was like. And I remember picking my son Isaac up from daycare on a Wednesday and just doing the food shop, and we get up the next morning. He's like, Dad, I'm hungry. I'm like, yeah, mate, just grab a banana or something. We're heading out for lunch. He's like, there's none left. And I'm like, what do you mean there's none left? We just went shopping yesterday. And he'd eaten them all, going through a growth spurt. So everyone that's got kids knows what that's like when that happens. And I was just blown away. And that was that kind of clicked. And I was like, well, that's fine for me. I'll just go to the shops and grab him some more food. But if that was your weekly allowance of fruit or something like that, or your kid's going through a massive growth spurt and they come up to you and go, Mum, Dad, I'm hungry, and you've got no food, I couldn't imagine like what that must feel like. And then when you head out to these food relief organisations that you hear about, they're all doing amazing jobs, and you get there and you go, oh, we need some food for our children or whatever the scenario is, and they turn around and go, well, sorry, we don't have enough. I just couldn't imagine what that's like. And it's about upwards of about 80,000 people every month get turned away across the country when they go seeking food relief. So it's actually quite a big shortage, despite the amazing work that's going on out there. And I just kind of went in my head with all those sort of thoughts and my background. I was like, I'm just going to do something about it. Why don't we just get a little bit of land, we'll put some seeds in the ground, we'll grow some food, and we'll just give it out inside the local community. And I guess that's kind of how it all really sort of started. And it's just sort of grown and grown from that particular position.
Wow. I really want to jump into a couple of different things based on what you said, but we'll continue firstly to talk about food for change. So there's 3 different ways in which you help, right? You grow food, you rescue food, and you also support. Tell us about those 3 different pillars and the change that you are making from this organisation.
Yeah, awesome. So initially it was just all about growing food. So effectively we've got 2 farms now in Melbourne. One at Clayton and the other one's at Mount Martha on the Mornington Peninsula, where we literally just put seeds in the ground, pull the food out and donate it out. We have lots of amazing volunteers and everyone can come down and get their hands dirty. It's a really, it's a beautiful place to be. And obviously during lockdown, it was amazing to have all that space and be outside. The rescue side, we have 2 facets for that. So on our website, we've uploaded a search feature that allows anybody in the country to donate food to food relief organisations. So there's about 2,500 on the ground organisations, and the problems that they have is most of them are little soup vans, or it's a local church, or it's a really small organisation. They don't have the web presence. So when you go, I don't know, Food Relief Richmond, it'll come up with Food Bank, it'll come up with us, but they're not local organisations. So this is a search database where anyone can find their local organisation and drop it around to them. So we've launched that this year. And prior to that, I built a bit of technology that is rolling out with IGA across Australia at the moment. And it's helping them match up all their excess food with those organisations in their local communities as well. So,
wow.
And then it's pretty cool. It's awesome. It's funny how things develop over time.
Absolutely.
And then we have the support function. So whenever we have something like, say, excess seeds, or if we've got excess funding, we go out and we provide that to other community organisations to help them with their food programs. So we could go out and purchase, 100 kilos of pasta or something and just donate it locally. A lot of our seeds go out to a lot of community gardens and different small organisations who kind of try and grow a little bit themselves inside their food programs, and we kind of support organisations that way.
That's brilliant. And you're so true what you said in terms of, you probably started this with one element of it in mind, and it's grown and evolved into so many different layers over the time. And, it's obviously there's so many ways in which you can help, and you're filling sort of quite a few pockets in the way that those pillars work. So well done on that. Sounds like it's an incredible effort on your behalf. Now, I want to go back to some of the comments you mentioned earlier and sort of the catalyst that made you kickstart this mission. Yep. I always talk about life-defining moments, and whether they are huge life-defining moments, which is obviously what you had with your dad, or the small moments like what you had with your son and the banana, right? There's two different types of life-defining moments, the small ones and the big ones. And if we're aware enough and we look out for how those moments have affected us, we can really start to create some positive change in our life. And that's exactly what you've done. And I really want to delve into perhaps the story with your dad a little bit deeper, because so many of us have, are enduring pain at the moment and have these pain points that hopefully one day we can turn into our purpose, which is pretty much what you've done. And, I just want to see that emotional transition, I suppose, between turning something from something very painful into something so inspiring, I suppose.
Yeah. That's the best place to start. So my dad being homeless, there's a bit of a story, and I'll get to that as well. But I guess there was a lot of, like, in the banana thing with my son was a small thing, but there was other small things along that kind of journey as well that kind of ticked into that kind of jumping over the cliff scenario. Definitely a massive influence from my mum. As a 4-year-old, we lived on Kangaroo Island, and she had a restaurant, so very food focused on that side of things. She's an amazing cook. Doesn't cook as much anymore, but absolutely amazing cook on that side of things. I've always sort of, grown little things at home and just randomly, one year put in 6 zucchini plants. And if anyone's ever grown zucchini, that's a major issue because you're never going to be able to eat that many zucchini on that side of things. So there's all these other little things that sort of added up to that. But my dad was definitely the massive catalyst and driving force, and not something that I was very comfortable talking about for a very, very long time. And the charity was effectively started without the other board members even knowing that my father was homeless on that side of things. It was something that I'd kept inside. My immediate family knew, even my close friends didn't even know on that side of things. So my dad's story effectively has unraveled and come to me after his passing on a few different scenarios. And I will get a little bit emotional, so forgive me on that side of things. But so it would have been in about 2005 or 2006. I left to go to Europe, just basically moved over, went for work, was still in contact with my dad, everything fine. And about a year into that journey, he just stopped calling, stopped emailing, just disappeared off the planet kind of thing. And I'm like, what is going on? I thought I'd done something wrong. Couldn't get a hold of him. Just kind of got very angry and confused and, just kind of parked it a little bit and just mentally didn't deal with it at all. I came back to Australia in 2010 and still hadn't heard from my father on that side of things. So it's been about 5 years, and had reached out to my uncle when I got back, and he was just like, yep, he dropped off the planet. Basically, my uncle was having the same problem, and he was just like, we don't know what's going on effectively. We get the odd phone call, but every time we see him, he comes. My grandmother was in a nursing home. We only ever see him at the nursing home and all this sort of stuff. And when I got back, I sort of was able to get in recontact with him. And we caught up a few times. I guess I never really had the courage to have the conversation. It was like, okay, I can see he's aged quite significantly. Something's probably going on, but my communication skills at that particular point in time weren't very, very good, and neither were his. And he was in my life and came to my wedding and all this sort of stuff. And it looked like everything was like on the surface. Nobody kind of knew what would turn up. Like, he came to my wedding fully clean, decked out in a tux, and arrived in a limousine. So that kind of scenario, but he was homeless, kind of thing.
Wow.
So about 6 weeks before my son was born, I get a call from Liverpool Hospital in Sydney. And they're like, we have your dad, he's dying, basically. He needs to be moved to palliative care. And I'm like, what the hell? Like, I've got, what's going on? And they're like, and after a bit of a conversation, they're like, well, that makes a lot of sense as to why he's had nobody turn up and all that sort of stuff. So he's been hiding it from all his friends and everything like that. So that was obviously a little bit intense. And I get down to the hospital, and there's a guy there called Mark, and he's from Wesley Mission. And he's sitting there with my dad. And I'm like, oh, here he is. He's like, Mark, I'm from Wesley Mission. I'm like, what do you mean? Kind of scenario. He's like, oh, we took your dad off the streets about 9 months ago, and we housed him, and we've been sort of looking after him ever since because he's been sick. I was like, okay. It's just like obviously mind blown. He passed away a couple of months later, which was obviously, quite emotional, intense. And I kind of parked, if you've ever had to clear out a parent or a relative or anybody's life, it's a very, very emotional time. I had to go into this homeless shelter, and the best way I can describe it is it would have been better to be set on fire than for me to actually take his stuff out. It was absolutely horrendous, and it was a roof over the head, but I've never seen anything like it before. And I've been to India, in some places where there's been some real poverty, and this was just a squalor of filth and mold, and it was awful. And so I took all these personal effects and just literally parked them in my garage. I was like, I can't deal with this right now. And was very, just trying to, deal with a newborn baby effectively at the same time. So just shoved it in that kind of box. And it kind of, I guess, festered in my mind a little bit over the years on that sort of thing. And about a year or so after, I started going through all these personal possessions and just, so much stuff. I'm like, I'm going to have to throw this out. Like, what do you do with it? Like, it's just stuff that means nothing to me, except for obviously photographs and things like that. So we started going through all of this, and then I opened up his medical records, and I'm like, now I get the full story. Now I understand kind of what happened was when I'd gone to the UK in 2005, he'd been diagnosed with terminal cancer, and basically given effectively 6 months to live. And my dad being my dad, I know he would never tell me that because he'd never want me to come back from Europe. He'd just want me to be there, have fun and that sort of stuff. Because obviously I would have come back. And then he's like, and you can see in his photographs, it's quite funny. You can see him getting sicker, but he's just pulled out all of his super, which you're allowed to do. And he's just gone on and done like 10 cruises, went all over the world, just blowing his money, having a great time. There is some interesting photos.
Thinking that he had 6 months to live.
Effectively, yeah, had all this stuff. And then, he lived 8 years.
Wow.
So too sick to work, insurance runs out, spend all your super money having a great time, and effectively that's how you become homeless. Too scared to talk to anybody, too scared to reach out to me or my uncle. And yeah, that's kind of what happened.
It's interesting, isn't it, when you think about people who end up in poverty situations and homelessness situations, you have this like preconceived idea of how they got there. But when you jump in and get to know the people and the stories behind them and the journey that has taken them to get there, everyone has their own story, their own reason for how they ended up there. And obviously your dad dealt with things very differently to how other people would have dealt with things like the diagnosis of getting sick. And he didn't want to hurt anyone, so just sort of cut everyone off. But you coming out and talking about this is so powerful. And I'm sure it hurts. I can see that it hurts, and it's very emotional to even hear it on the other side, let alone be part of it. So I really appreciate you sharing that with us. And the more awareness that we have around this type of situation that people can find themselves in, the more that we can sort of understand them better and also help. And the fact that you've created something so powerful from this pain that you're feeling is so special. And, there's no discounting that ever. And I'm sure that will be seen, that's your life impact that will never be taken away from you.
Yeah, it's pretty, like, and I've heard, so my dad's story is so common that it's like, it's not special. Like, it's obviously special to me and all that sort of stuff, and it has a massive impact on me. But the stories I hear, I'm just like, which is a good thing. It shows it's a common theme, but obviously, like I said, it needs to be talked about, and we need to come to these, especially the homeless. The homeless actually only make up 7% of the people who receive food relief across the country. So there's a lot of other stories in there. And so on my journey of probably when we were developing the app with IGA, there's a couple of things that happened which kind of tie into my dad's story. So as we were developing this app, the Metcash, who own IGA, up in Sydney, my dad was living in Sydney. One of the other board directors was in charge of finding the first organisation that the first IGA store was going to donate food to on that side of things. So he's off organising that. I'm dealing all with the tech and, chatting with IGA and things like that. And we get to that first collection, and food gets collected. It's like equivalent of about $2,500 worth of food, which would have gone into the bin, but it's perfectly good food and edible. And we follow this food on this journey, and it goes into this men's homeless shelter, which was basically the same homeless shelter that my father was at for a period of his life.
Wow.
And I get there, and the penny drops. It was like right near my grandmother's nursing home, and I'm like, that's the only time I'd see my dad. So he'd obviously go there, get freshened up, come see me. I'd know nothing different, and he would go back to that. And then if he got in time, he'd be fine. Otherwise, he'd be out on the streets for that particular night. And I remember being there, and I'm just like, started wailing effectively. And the other directors turned around and said, what the hell is going on here?
Oh,
I'm like, we're going to need a beer and I'll give you the story. Just give me some minutes on that side of things. It was just this moment where everything just kind of came together. And it was pretty
These
crazy.
serendipitous moments. It's almost like a nod of approval in a way where, what you're doing right now is creating so much positive in the world, and it's almost like a nod from him. It's beautiful. Yeah. Oh, thank you so much for sharing all of that. I know it must be hard to do so. How has your experience, helping other people now and providing all these meals? And I don't know, you probably don't see a lot of the people face to face in terms of the people that you're helping, but how has this changed the way you see the world, do you think?
So like we see very few people. We get a lot of feedback and stuff like that. But I guess when I started the charity, the whole premise was all these amazing aid organisations, we don't need to be doing what they're doing. They just need more food. effectively. So the whole idea is, how can we give these agencies more food? So we don't see too many people. And I guess the change in the way I see the world is more probably the way, how to put it, in just more self-trust and making sure you're doing things, you're honest with yourself internally. And if you're doing that and you're doing the right thing, everything tends to line up nicely. The whole journey with the charity, people will look at the figures, like you go, wow, it's all these meals. And I'm like, it has felt so easy to do that. And A, because I love what I'm doing, I'm very passionate about it. But B, it feels like everything's in alignment. And for me, it's learning to trust that in myself again, and trusting that little internal voice that, yes, this is the path I'm meant to be on. This is the right decision at this particular time. So it's more of not outward, like looking at the world. It's more that internal reflection that it's probably been the most biggest change for me personally. And just having the trust and getting that validation. So like a small example of that was during my divorce, I had a massive falling out with my family over the decision to relocate to Melbourne, which I viewed as the exact right thing to do for my son, for various different reasons, and they very adamantly disagreed with it. But something deep inside really was just like, this is the right decision. And even based on that one decision, that's kind of led to the charity and all this other stuff happening as well. And it's just that reflection on those little moments and just going, trust yourself. When this kind of feeling happens, trust it, go for it, see where it leads, kind of thing. So.
You're trusting your gut instinct, your intuition, and you can't fight that when you tune into that, can you?
No, and there's a difference between certain scenarios and making, you weigh up different points of view and you make a decision versus something that's happening internally inside you that like that it's the right thing and what you need to be doing. Whether or not you do it, 9 times out of 10, most people don't. And I'm very guilty of that in the past.
I'm making a big decision at the moment whether we stay here in Fiji or we actually head back to Australia because of what's going on here COVID wise. And I got some good advice actually the other day. Someone said to me, don't make the decision from fear. Yeah. Which is so commonly what we are prone to do. And I really sat with that for a while and tried to figure out, like, it was this pros and cons situation. I'm writing lists at the moment and trying to make these decisions. But when you make a decision out of fear, that's not what feels good. And you're trying to escape a certain situation, then end up in probably a worse situation. So I'm trying to really tune into that feeling that you had and make the right choice based on what my gut instinct and my intuition is telling me, so that I end up on the best path for myself and my family.
Yeah. And I think from my experience, what I would say in that scenario is, if you try and force that intuition, then that's just as bad as coming at it from fear. There'll probably be a moment, or maybe there's already been a moment, and you'll just go, oh yeah, that's it. And all this weight will just drop off. And you'll be like, that's the right way to move forward, kind of thing. And there might be other little small decisions to do, and random things, but you'll know where to go.
Taking a deep, deep breath, listening to that. That's actually really good advice. And I think when things just fall into place and they're not forced, that's another big indicator that you're doing the right thing.
Yeah,
wow.
Absolutely.
Really good advice. So what were you doing before this, Matt? What roles were you involved in, or businesses?
So I've never been good for working for other people.
Neither.
That sort of things. And I tend to bore easily. I've had so many jobs, and lots of random things and lots of fun things. I've had a few different businesses directly prior to coming to Melbourne. I was running a commercial cleaning business which was reasonably big. And then, we had a farm that we were setting up and a few different things. I've worked all over the world. Used to work on cruise ships, sailing around the world for a couple of years. I worked in London for 6 years. Just
Love variety. There's nothing wrong with that. And I think the more that we own that, it used to be such a, jack of all trades type of situation. Don't be a jack of all trades, be a master of one. I don't believe in that anymore. And I think the world is so much bigger now and we're so much more accessible to different information and options these days that we don't have to stick to the same thing forever, even if we're not enjoying it.
Exactly. Yeah. Geez, you don't want to be doing it forever if you're not enjoying it.
Oh, exactly right.
On the jack of all trades scenario from a business point of view at the moment, with the internet, I was around when the internet wasn't around. The ability to tap into the master of one is phenomenal, and you can do that so easily and segment your business. And if you're a jack of all trades and you've got a little bit of knowledge in all these sections, it really does help a lot.
Very true in any business or company or organization that you're running. Now, we have people listening to this all the time, and I really love to give a bit of advice in terms of if they see themselves in your seat, maybe 5-10 years ago, for example, and they have this pain point that we were talking about earlier that they want to see fixed. What would you say might be the good first steps in order to create their own purpose-led mission, for example? Or what were yours, if that's too hard to answer?
Yeah, I guess it's a great question. The first thing I say to this to a lot of people is Food for Change is now, it's a beast. It's one of the biggest food charities in the country. That was never my goal on that side of things. So initially I was like, if I could just get 10,000 meals out to people over however many years, that'd be amazing. And that was just this small little goal and that sort of thing. And we did 10,000 in the first 6 months. And then I was like, oh crap, okay, we're onto something. So I think the first thing is to realize you can have a mission and a purpose, and it doesn't need to be this grand, amazingly big thing, especially to start with. It gets, like, from experience, overwhelming to try and think of things. That's that. And there's lots of quotes, eating the elephant and all that sort of stuff. And they're all ring true. That's why they're out there on that side of things. So I think the first thing is to identify that pain point and really narrow down as to what that is, and get very specific. And for a lot of people, that will take a lot of time and some really deep soul searching on that side of things. And then if you're like, well, I want to do something about it, I want to be involved, I want to help other people, or whatever the scenario it is, next key would be to sort of research and see what's out there and what other people are doing. So for us, when I was looking at that, it was like, right, I want to be involved in this. How can I do it? And I was obviously in a fortunate position where I had the time and the money that I could sit back and take some time and do this. It was what we do, and nobody else was doing it effectively. So the way we do the rescue model and the way we grow our food, there's nobody in Australia that does that. There's people that are now doing that and have cottoned on to a little bit to what we're doing and are doing that sort of thing, which is amazing, because the more food we grow, the better. The more food we rescue, the better. So have a look around, because there's 50,000 charities in Australia, or non-for-profits and social enterprises. So chances are somebody's already doing what you're doing. And if that is, then 9 times out of 10, you're better off tapping into that. There's no point duplicating something. Then, yeah, that's probably the way I'd go about it to start with, sort of make those decisions. And it could be a case like we were looking nationally as to what was happening. You might just look in your local council area as to what's happening and what impact you want to make inside that particular area on that side of things. So.
I love that. So for us listening now, how can we help you and the organisation, the charity, to grow, rescue or support whatever seat we're sitting in at the moment, coming from different angles?
Yeah. So there's a couple of things we can do. We always love volunteers out at the farm, which is awesome. So if we're in Victoria, we can do that. Obviously, you can donate to our organisation through our website. We also run a food box subscription, so it's a little bit like a social enterprise where we sell a monthly food box, and kind of just supplements the food that you would normally buy from the supermarkets, but all that profit goes into us running the organisation. Obviously, share this podcast would be amazing, and just getting that word out there. And, if you're not helping us, there's other organisations inside your local community. You can go down to your local food bank, you can volunteer there, and just get that word out, and that understanding that food insecurity is not just the homeless people, which is exactly what I thought it used to be. It's 10% of the population. So if you look at 10 of your friends, one of them in their life, chances are, will be food insecure and you won't know about it. So get out and help and spread that word. It would be absolutely amazing.
That's brilliant. And just check in with your people as well. I think it's a timely advice right now to listening to this is, you may think what people are going through, but let's ask them. Let's ask more people, how are you actually doing? How are you doing really? And are you happy? Because we don't get asked that very often. And I think, your close people around you should know if you're struggling. So it's a good timely reminder. The website, everyone, is foodforchange.org.au. So jump on and follow. And Matt's on LinkedIn as well if you want to reach out to him. I hope you don't mind me saying that.
No, more than welcome.
Yeah. Now, the only negative about, filming this virtually is that I can't come there and give you a big hug, because I feel like after sharing what you did today, I really would love to just give you that big human support of a hug. Yeah. But, I'm really grateful that you shared who you are today and all of that pain that you've been through. And I know it's going to resonate with so many people and just create more of an impact for what you're doing and the mission that you're on. So thank you for all of what you shared today.
No, my pleasure. And thank you very much for having me on and helping to get the word out. It's greatly appreciated.
Thank you for listening to the Things You Can't Unhear podcast. I'd love to keep the conversation going. Let us know what you thought of this episode, and if something profound came up for you that you want to share, let's talk about it. You can find me on Instagram at Things You Can't Unhear, or on my personal page at Maritza_Barone. And if someone will benefit from something that was said in this show, make sure you share it with them too. If you haven't already, hit the subscribe button and keep up to date with what's next. And if you can spare a few seconds, please rate and review the show on iTunes, just so other people can find us more easily and quickly. And as always, my friends, be happy, be healthy, be conscious, and be kind.